Hello, welcome back to this week's episode of Closed by Mo. My name is Mohammed. You can call me Mo. I hope I'm your favorite YouTube host on most things real estate in New York City. I'm also a real estate investor and a broker based out in New York City, and of course I cover Long Island, Nassau County, Suffolk County, all that fun stuff. In this week's video, we're not necessarily going to be talking about any investment deals, investment criteria, different formulas, none of that fun stuff. Today we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that is often overlooked, especially with first-time buyers, first-time investors, first-time landlords, and that is how to screen potential tenants and how to make sure you're putting yourself in the best position to avoid any kind of landlord-tenant disputes down the line, because I have seen a lot of these different situations where a landlord or a property investor especially a first-time investor who's dealing with a lot of difficult situations with the tenants that they may have placed themselves and they made a mistake when they did that, or number two, that they may have inherited the tenant when they bought it, when they bought the property, and they did not really do their due diligence when it comes to understanding everything that entails by inheriting that tenant. Without further ado, let's jump right into this week's video in terms of sort of a guide to screening potential tenants. Now, before I jump into this video in terms of a guide on how to screen potential tenants and of course mitigate against any negative situations any negative situations that you might run into as a landlord or an investor down the line, I want to clarify something. None of this advice is going to be 100% effective 100% of the time. And what I mean by that is not to say that this guide is completely useless and you're going to be wasting your time watching this video, but in reality, life happens. Life gets in the way. You might have a fantastic tenant in year one, month one, year zero, whatever it is, and that tenant might become the worst tenant you've ever had at the end of their lease or at the end of their whatever amount of period of time that they've been renting from you from. This happens, right? This is life. You cannot control every single aspect. You cannot control 100% of everything. However, you can make data-driven decisions based off of historical data. And this is where having a very effective guide on how to screen tenants comes into play, because although you might not be able to completely avoid any risk, you can take very calculated risks based off of all the data you have available to you, which leads into my first point, which is establish very clear rental criteria. And what I mean by this is you want to have extra crystal clear criteria on the quantifiable things off of a tenant's potential application. And what I mean by that is credit requirements, right? It's a credit number or credit score can be easily quantifiable. Income requirements. Some landlords might have income requirements that are like, hey, your gross annual income should be 40 times the rent or should be minimum 60 times the rent, whatever it is, based on your market, based on your criteria. You might also have requirements from debt to income ratios. Anything that involves anything that's quantifiable is usually a very good start. I personally have a requirement where anything below a certain credit score, I just say, hey, I don't want to really bother reading this application, because in your market, you might be inundated with all these different applications. You have to set very clear rental criteria or application criteria to be able to sift through all that noise. It sounds heartless, it might sound a little bit cold, but you have to look at it from the perspective of doing, all the hard work and being ruthless upfront to make that entire process completely smooth from start all the way to finish if they ever do decide to move up. The second thing or second guide that I always recommend my clients is to request a complete rental application. I don't care if you have a property manager that's running it. I don't care if you decide to run it because you don't want to pay a property manager, which is exactly what I do. Make sure you collect a comprehensive rental application. Besides the fact that it's going to give you all the different information that you might need from a potential tenant, like credits and all those consent forms that you need to collect, it is also a very good way to show the tenant that, hey, this landlord is very organized, they are on top of their game, they have all the paperwork and everything sorted out. This is not any kind of like mom and pop landlord that I might be able to push over and take advantage of on whatever different factors. Again, I'm not saying this is how everyone thinks. I'm just saying every little action, every little interaction does set a tone for future interactions. And if you're the type of landlord that says, oh, I don't have an application, I just sort of go off of my gut feeling, what does that do? That opens up a door for people to take advantage of you, especially because your gut feeling might be incorrect on things. That's why I always say have a document trail, have a paper trail, make sure you get everything in writing. The third thing that I would recommend is perform credit checks. You would be shocked, you'd be surprised at how many landlords I speak with that are in very difficult situations, especially in New York City when they have to evict tenants for not paying or having any kind of delinquent actions or things that they've done. And I always ask them, well, did you do a credit check? Did you do a rental application for this tenant? And the answer is always no. I'm like, what on earth are you doing? Why do you not check credit? Why do you not collect rental applications for tenants? Because you could have avoided all of this heartache and headache and future headache that you might have with eviction court now, all if you did a couple of extra steps of work in the very beginning. 30 minutes, an hour of extra work will save you a lifetime of headaches, especially with housing court in New York City. The fourth thing that I would recommend for all my clients, and by the way, I might lose track of all the different numbers on this list here. The fourth thing that I would recommend is make sure you verify employment and verify income. Anyone, and I mean anyone, can duplicate fake W-2s, fake tax returns, all that fun stuff. They can also give you fake numbers and fake bank statements. They can fake all of that stuff. Believe it or not, if you Google it, you'll be able to generate something yourself as well that might fool the untrained eye. However, you have to make sure you're verifying everything. If you don't know how to do that, or if you're not sure that the person you're calling is legitimate, there are companies out there that you can pay a couple of bucks a month, and they will do all that for you, and they will tell you whether or not this is verified or whether if it's fake or not. Remember, most people are not here to deceive you. Most tenants' applications are completely accurate. They might not hit all your criteria, but most people are transparent and honest regardless of what you might feel or what the media might have you believe. However, it's the bad apples that we want to sort of watch out for, and that's why you have to be very ruthless up front. That is why you should also make sure you verify rental history. Now, what I mean by verifying rental history is make sure you collect the landlord references of whoever is applying, and make sure you call and verify that. And you might even be able to do a background check or a quick Google check to make sure that that information matches with what the address information that they provided. For example, if they give you a previous address and you look up that address and you see that there's no names associated of the tenants' names to that address, that should set off a red flag. These are all free services. You don't have to pay for this. You can Google it really quickly in terms of verifying name and addresses, and you will find maybe 5 or 10 different options that will pull up right away. Other things you can also definitely do is obviously do a criminal background check. There are screening services, there are background check companies, there are credit reporting services that you can purchase or pay for as the landlord directly. You might even be able to pass on a portion of this cost to the tenant. Certain areas, certain cities, certain states of the country will have different requirements and limitations on how much an application fee to charge. In New York City, in New York State, the rental application fee is capped at $20. So there's a couple of different services that can do everything for $20. A lot of other ones charge more than $20. In that case, the landlord would have to pay that difference on top of $20, assuming they're collecting the $20 application fee from the tenant themselves. A couple of other things you should also definitely make sure that you get a chance to speak with the potential tenants. Make sure you have a good fit overall. If you have an uneasy feeling or if you're getting like a bad gut vibe, that isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but it should be something that encourages you to look into all those other quantifiable things with a very, with a high level of scrutiny under a microscope, because you want to make sure that everything checks out. Oftentimes when we have a bad gut feeling about something, the brain is typically picking up on something that you consciously are not. That's why there might be a little bit of a disconnect. Again, I'm not saying just because you have a bad feeling that everything, everyone's horrible and out to get you, or else the world wouldn't work, but it is something that would encourage me, if I was in your shoes, to really dig into and make sure that everything is verified and everything is accurate, that what the tenant has provided to you. Other things you should also definitely make sure, communicate clearly. Don't flip-flop with tenants. Don't flip-flop with anyone that is working with you as a landlord-vendor relationship. That is going to affect their perception of you. If you keep flip-flopping with a tenant, they might see that, okay, well, this person keeps forgetting on, this person might be forgetting on how to, manage different tenants, manage different requests, things like that. That might affect you negatively with a tenant. It might also give them the impression that you'll be very forgetful and that they'll be able to take advantage of you. Other things as well that are super important: document your process. You always want to make sure you get everything in writing. Make sure you have all the paperwork that you need and keep it on file for at least 3 to 5 years, I would say. I don't know what the requirements are in your state or that even New York State has any requirements for this, but I keep every single tenant documented, recorded. I have it in email, I have it in digital format, I also have it in paper format in one of the folders that you can't see behind me. Another thing as well that is very important is it is adhere to fair housing laws. This is something that I have personally run into against other landlords that I've tried to represent. Unfortunately, I had to walk away. You would be shocked at how many landlords or how many new or small-time landlords think that they are doing the right thing by not adhering to fair housing laws, that you are going to be in very hot water. You do not want to commit any kind of federal, federally regulated mistakes or break any federally regulated laws. And you don't want to be a bad person. Again, fair housing laws has very strict requirements and protections for folks under certain classes. For example, gender, family orientation, things like that, and a bunch of other things. You should not be discriminated against this. Again, this goes back to having strict rental guidelines. Income, credit, background checks, stuff like that. Those you can definitely use in terms of deciding whether or not your tenant application will get approved, but make sure you're not breaking any kind of fair housing laws, not just because it's illegal, but who are you to decide? That makes no sense. You shouldn't be having any kind of discriminatory practices against something or someone that, over a factor that they can't control, that person cannot control, that they were born into. With that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this really quick and short and easy video on how to screen potential tenants. I'll definitely be sending this out to you if you are one of my potential clients that is thinking about renting out their property for the very first time. I encourage all of my clients, especially first-time investors, to try and rent it out yourself at the beginning, because that'll give you a lot of experience on how to manage and deal with tenants, even if that means you don't get to pay me a broker's fee, which I would of course love. With that, if you have any further questions or concerns, or you're like, hey Mo, I'm running into this tenant situation and I'm not certain about it, can you please help me? Let me know in the comment section below or DM me. All my information is below too in the description. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.